Right.
The older version that. Hold on. Number. Sorry, guys. Gotcha. Right about that. You can tell the pink letters. I love it. It's supposed to be certain. That's pretty good to know. I didn't know it was a idiot. We didn't just Tuesday. In this class, the 16th. Yeah. I find as well. Maybe one of them today.
So I wanted to show you something real quick before we started back in franchising. So I showed you Duncan Hines the other day. Talked about Duncan Hines. He was a salesperson and traveled across the United States during the Depression. Because at that time we realized that there were no franchises at that time. As he traveled across the United States during the 30s, he was an individual who spent a lot of time taking very copious notes about exactly what was the experience like that when he was going through it. And as I said before, he happened to be at a dinner party one time, and they looked at his work and they said, "This is incredible. Somebody ought to publish this." And this is where history goes on. So I wanted to also kind of show you the actual books that he did publish. And I kind of want to relate this a little bit to kind of put this in our own proper perspectives. So this is the 1959 book. And by this time, Duncan Hines has become so enormously wealthy that he's actually created a Duncan Hines Institute. His name became synonymous with good life. All right. This is the right places to go to eat. These are the best places to stay. And it even had some pretty decent advice. And so if you look at through his book, where it starts is he comes up with all of these codes that when you're looking at the work, you get an idea of what kind of place you're going to be at. So I want you to think of your own favorite influencers on YouTube or whoever they are. He comes up with a list. So he says no advertising is ever accepted. Now, for you who have your own personal influencers, you think, or you are right, that an influencer who does not have a sponsor is more authentic than one who doesn't. A lot of research on that. So no advertising is ever accepted. No place ever pays for a listing. Cleanliness is the most important thing. This is his standards, and these are the standards that Duncan Hines came. Now, once it was started, they got all sorts of people mailing in, not email, but mailing in their own suggestions. And it became so overwhelming that he had to put together a staff to be able to handle everything. And so it's a very interesting discussion about his life and what he went through, talked about the books themselves, talked about not a complete list, and he gave very good advice, like how much should you tip? What is tipping about? Menus in foreign countries, what should be expected in terms of sanitary conditions. Now, I had to learn from my professor. In order to get my PhD, I had to become a wine person. And this is an excellent 2-page discussion about how you go about selecting wine. I would urge any of you who aren't sure about wine and you want to look perceptive, this is excellent suggestions. Light wine with lighter foods, burgundies with meats, clarets that go to lighter red meats, red burgundies served with heavier dishes. Perfect stuff. It's easy to do. And the information that is now is the same, is the same that it was then. So anyway, I just kind of want to give you a vibe of how much respect he had, and ultimately what he did for Colonel Sanders. All right. Because when he got to Colonel Sanders and said, "This is some of the best chicken I've ever had," he came in here. That L means lunch, by the way. This is the actual listing that was in the 50s. Continuous 24-hour service, sizzling steaks, fried chicken, country ham, hot biscuits. Lunch, 50 cents to $1. 60 cents to $1 is dinner. That's what the D means. And all that was needed was just that one little piece for Colonel Sanders to go on and make his success. Colonel Sanders did not start the franchise. There was another lawyer who came in and said, "You deserve to franchise this." Colonel Sanders grabbed that whole franchising idea because, as I said before, he was 65 years old when he started Kentucky Fried Chicken. He started it with his first Social Security check, and truthfully, he had nowhere else to go. His wife said he was a failure. He'd never get anywhere. And this was a man in his 60s that was doing this quite simply because he had to find a way to survive. He dove himself into it, and he had two most important things: the ingredients and cleanliness. Sounds like Duncan Hines. All right. He required all the franchises to buy stainless steel cooking utensils. He demanded that those utensils are cleaned every night at a certain temperature. He was a man who was deep into his belief about qualities. And he was known, as I said before, to go into a franchise if it was dirty and close the franchise right then. And as I said before, this was the winner of one of Colonel Sanders' #1 cups. Manager who was 14 years old and started working in the KFC quite simply because he didn't have any choice. He was an orphan. He was raised in a wonderful life, but he had to go out and fend for himself. And he said that everything that he ever learned that was important, he learned from Colonel Sanders. And this man, as I've said before, turned out to be Dave Thomas. Okay. Interesting how all these connections go together. And when I talk about franchising as being a great way to disseminate knowledge up and down the corporate streams, this is exactly what I mean. Dave Thomas was a wonderfully generous human being. In the last 5 years of his life, when he was fighting his illnesses, he set up a $80 million foundation for orphans and children without homes, and that is his legacy now. Those things happen because Duncan Hines happened to walk into a little gas station between the Cumberland Gap and Kentucky. Amazing stuff. All right. So without further ado, we'll move on. Yes, I know. So I wanted to do just one more thing here. I wanted to kind of show, he also did vacation guides as well. Talked about what are the better places to go. Each state in the union had its own separate page. And once again, he can't help himself. But one of the things that he does is he makes recommendations about the best places to go, how to go about doing reservations, how to get there, annual events, how to be a good traveler. That was his intention. And so, interesting, he tells you which clothes to take, how much money to take. Does anybody know the oral formula about how to travel? You take half the clothes and twice the money. Okay. So pack your bag, then take half of that, double the amount of money you have, And you're gonna be able to come home with not 2 suitcases, but 1, all right? So whenever Dr. Albinson goes to Sweden, she usually leaves with 1 suitcase, comes back with 2, of course she's sweet. So anyway, just thought I would pass this along. Pretty interesting stuff. So to go back to what a discussion was going, the test will be next Tuesday, April 16th. It will be chapters 6, 7, 8, and on Thursday, we will talk about everything that we need from chapter 9, which is the emerging structures and channels. It will be very much like test 2. And just go over the videos to make sure you have a good foundation of knowledge, okay? All right, so we got through, talked about the franchisor and the franchisees, and now we're going to talk about franchising strategies. So the test definition of franchising, and this is important, remember, is that franchising is 2 organizations, the franchisor and the franchisee. And remember that one vital component of franchising is the deliberate loss of identity. Remember that, okay? That is in the basic definition of franchising. As I said before, if you go to McDonald's and you go through the drive-through window and you're sitting there at the drive-in window, you'll see a little bronze or a little gold-looking plaque that says managed by such and such organization and phone number. That particular store is being run by a different organization than McDonald's corporate. They are 2 organizations, the franchisee accepting a deliberate loss of identity to be able to have the benefits of the franchisor. And so we talked about that as well, the advantages of the brand name, the big shoulders, the ability to be able to have a process, to be able to succeed. And remember, as I said before, franchising is not about how to start a business, but how to maintain one. Anybody can start a business, keeping them alive, that's the hard part, okay? And so now we're going to talk about some of the different strategies about franchises. Now, I just said that the deliberate loss of identity is a key mark of franchising. You see that in your test, it's the definition, write it down. Now I'm going to give you an exception, like everything is. A product and trade name franchise. A product and trade name franchise is different. If you go to Mr. Tire, Mr. Tire is a product and trade name franchise. All authorized franchise systems authorize the dealers to sell their product line and use their trade name for promotional purposes. Whether the franchise is a trade name franchise or a business format franchise, which we'll talk about, both do the same thing. However, the product name franchise basically allows the franchisee the right to use their advertising, use their names, sell their products, but it does not have a deliberate self-loss of identity. Product or trade name franchises are more more likely to be seen in automobiles, automobile dealerships, and generally where the product is complex and requires a dedicated staff to be able to maintain these. This is where product and trade name franchises come in. They also generally sell more than one brand in the same category. Now, if you were to go to Mr. Tire and you wanted to shop Michelin's there, you could. You could also shop Goodyear. You could shop Cooper Tires. You could shop, oh gosh, Yokohama's, I believe, Pirelli's. You could shop multiple ones. And Mr. Tire would be the brand, or excuse me, would be the authorized franchise in which you could do it. It also means that the authorized franchisor can do things like handle, oh gosh, warranty work, excuse me. Franchises actually sell at the wholesale and the retail level too. So I got into this, I was at the Appalachian Research and Business Symposium at Marshall University Thursday night and Friday morning. And one of the things we started talking about was Buc-ee's. So has anybody been into Buc-ee's? Okay. Buc-ee's is, I don't know, the Disneyland of convenience stores, with the lack of a better word. It is an amazing kind of relationship. And they're now building Buc-ee's across the south, west to Arizona, east into Florida and Mississippi, and there's one in South Carolina, and there's one in Seaverville now. Buc-ee's is a great example. It is a wholly owned store, but one of the things that Buc-ee's has is so much strength. So one of the, the manufacturer's agents wanted to go to Buc-ee's and sell them toilet seats. Okay. Here's something you didn't know. Buc-ee's changes their toilet seats every 3 weeks. Yeah. Can you name any other gas station that changes their toilets, seats every 3 weeks? It's such a simple, fundamental thing. But has anyone ever been in a Buc-ee's bathroom? Yeah, they got 4 people there that are waiting 24 hours a day to keep the place clean. It is, yes, it is amazing. You want to stop only for the bathrooms, that's fine, I get it. But just something as simple as cleanliness in the bathroom. Anyway, they buy at such levels that they don't even have to go at the retail level, they go at the wholesale. They go directly to the manufacturers and they buy toilet seats by the skid. All right, so it's amazing. So anyway, product and trade name, at the retail level, generally think of tire, auto, furniture dealers, long brand names, have their own family name, such as Mr. Tire. At the wholesale level, which is what Buc-ee's buys at, you have soft drink bottlers, distributors. Most beer and soft drink franchises ship the formulas to bottlers across the United States because it's theoretically impossible to bottle every single Coke in Atlanta, Georgia. It can't be done. But at the wholesale level, they give them the right to do those formulas and everything else, and they bottle them, and that's how Coke gets made. How do the manufacturers of Pirelli tires and Michelin, how do they make their money in a franchise situation? They make their profits by the margins that they sell to the dealers. One of the other things to recognize is that once in a in a product and trade name franchise, once the manufacturer sells the tires to the downstream franchisee, they are resolved of all rights and consequences because they also pay for them and they transfer title. Remember this also in a trade name franchise, they have the right to set prices, which you do not have in a business format franchise. And so that's why you can see tire dealerships running things like buy 3 tires, get the 4th free. Because they have the right to set prices. And that's what a product and trade name franchise. So it's an authorized system at both the retail and wholesale level. You can use their trade name for promotional purposes. The downstream provider generally is as well or even more experienced on how to use that stuff. They do warranty work. But once the producers make their profits on the margins that they sell to the dealers, effectively their hands go away. They don't try to run the franchise. They let the franchisees do their jobs. And so that's a product and trade name franchise. A business format franchising licenses for an entire way of doing business. In a business format franchise, the franchisee definitely gives away their identity. You buy the ability to use the trade name or sign. There is a broad two-way pipeline of know-how from the franchisor to the franchisee, usually initiated by daily and weekly and monthly reports. The franchisee dedicates themselves to the franchisor and sells those products only. And there's a constant continuing commercial and technical assistance by the franchisor for the franchisee. It's a good system. Everybody pulls in the same direction. It becomes a great pipeline back and forth between the corporate and local. Great example is, of course, Dave Thomas. And in its way, as I've said before, it is a great chance for ultimate success because hopefully you won't make the mistakes running the business that others have made. And so these are two unique formats. Okay. Franchising, in order to be successful, has to be in a structure in which you consider that the franchisor and the franchisee will maintain businesses for an extended period of time. In order to do that successfully, they tightly govern usually all business behavior with contracts. Contracts are vital and important because it explicitly spells out the duties and the responsibilities by both parties. And so there are three things that contracts cover, how they get paid, who owns the land, and what to do if everything goes sideways. Franchise contracts generally start out in 15 years. So in other words, a contract will remain fixed and in place, and the sundial date is a decade and a half away. And there's reasons for that. It's continuity. Contracts tend to be written to make sure that everything is fair among all parties. That is another important reason why you have contracts. And that is to eliminate even the implications of unfairness, because there is nothing more corrosive to the relationship than unfairness. And we'll talk about that when we get into power. And so how do payment systems happen in franchises? Well, the first thing is you have sunk cost. A sunk cost, and by the way, know what a sunk cost is? Do you recover sunk costs? No, they're sunk. That's what they mean. All right. So you don't worry about whether or not you're going to get it back, because you don't. And here's another thing, folks. Don't ever worry about needing to make up your mind if you're considering costs you've already sunk, because that's not the way to come up with an answer. Sometimes you leave your suitcase where it is and you run. Okay. So sunk costs are part of the initial investment that a franchisee can never recover. It's usually the upfront fee. Now, the sunk cost also has another side for the franchisor. They now have committed partners and they have obligations as well. So franchise fees can be kind of interesting. I talked about it yesterday. McDonald's franchise fee is $1 million, which if you have $1 million, why you'd want a McDonald's, I'll never know. Or as small as Subway, which was as little as $14,000. And that was a brilliant idea by Subway because it involved the greatest expansion of any franchise in history for the last decade and a half, until unfortunately they started bumping along. But it was very interesting. Their franchise fee was so low that it meant that mom and pop grocery stores could actually compete against Walmart. And so it was another great revenue stream, and it was a great idea by Subway. Now, Chick-fil-A's franchise fee is $2,000. So why doesn't Chick-fil-A grow more? Chick-fil-A is a very unique franchise. Chick-fil-A only allows you to own one outlet. That's it. Chick-fil-A demands that you do not make over 50% of your total income on other business activities. Chick-fil-A requires 4 years for them to investigate you and your corporation. So that's why franchises only grow slowly. And yet there's no question Chick-fil-A is the #1 franchise practically in the world. They have, 60% of the McDonald's, or 60% of the number of franchises that McDonald's has, and yet it's the #1 franchise in the United States because they make $6.5 million per location versus $4 million for McDonald's. So it's been a brilliant success story. And their way of doing franchising is definitely different from others, but they've been able to achieve some kind of success. Okay. Royalty on sales. If I generate $100,000 in sales, not net income, $100,000 in sales, and I have a royalty fee of 9%, It means before I pay my first bill, $9,000 goes to my franchisor. That's what a royalty fee is. And so that is kind of the optimal hostage for the franchising post, the royalties on sales. But that's what you signed up for. So if I'm a franchise and I'm trying to grow, I might take a flyer, take a risk. I might forego upfront money. I might say, we'll waive your franchise fee because we need businesses out there selling our products. And so we're willing to say, no franchise fee, just pay us royalties. And then the last thing, and this is so vital to the success of a franchisor, and that is tied sales. 50 years ago, McDonald's had their buns made by a local bakery all across the United States. That's no longer true now. Almost 100% of what McDonald's sells comes directly from McDonald's corporate. So once again, the advantages of a franchise or to act like a wholesaler, to collect all of the requirements from all of the McDonald's all over the world inside the United States. All of those go to corporate. Corporate plans it out, and every 1 to 2 days even, McDonald's rolls in a new truck and brings everything that every local franchise needs. Now just think about all of the shipping that's going on from franchisee to franchisor over hundreds of thousands of locations across the United States. It is staggering to think about how much effort is being done. But this is incredibly efficient and very inexpensive. It assures that there's a continuous input. It means that the franchisor is making money off of the royalties, off of the sunk costs, and off of everything that they sell downstream every month. And so, yep, it's good. Just think of it this way. Think of all of those things that are tied in. Why wouldn't a franchisor want their downstream partners to succeed? It's one of the really smart business ways to break that problem of having interdependent and independent organizations work together. So, as I said before, on last Thursday, anyway, one of the most difficult things in franchising is owning land. And this negotiating of leases. When you buy your first home, or when you buy your home, it will be one of the most labor-intensive things you ever do. The average home takes 7 weeks to close. It usually generates 140 pages of work. That's up from 60 when I worked at a bank. This requires specialists, especially in real estate. The franchisors buy the land and they lease the property to the franchisee. The reason why is it makes the termination clause credible. If you didn't have this, then you could have franchisors say, fine, we own the store, we own the land. We're going to put ears on the front of ours and call it McDonald Disney's. There's a few healthy lawsuits. But once again, realized that franchisors are able to assist franchisees. They reduce the capital requirements that are needed. And franchisors can evict the franchisee while retaining the site for a new one to come in. Franchisees basically will turn it into, a franchisor will turn it into a company store, run the store while they're looking for potential clients to buy. This is what happened to my friend Bobby Hughes. Robert, excuse me, Bobby. Bobby, when he came to North Carolina after getting his degree at Southern Miss, Domino's desperately wanted to grow. And he did pretty good for a year or two while he flipped pizzas. They brought him in as a trainee. He became a store operator. They willingly helped him with the real estate. He worked on the real estate, bought it now. And as I said before, his at the last class reunion, Bobby in real estate owns $168 million. It's just a real estate. Because he became something that we're going to talk about at the very end. So, this is the reasons why you lease. You help your franchisee out. You put teeth into the termination clause. And franchisors are smart real estate people. McDonald's is the #3 owner of real estate in the United States. #1 is the government. You want to guess who's #2? Walmart. Walmart, by the way, will not sell the land once they go from a Walmart to a super Walmart. They won't sell the land because they're afraid of somebody putting in another Walmart there, or Walmart-ish. And so if you notice, if you've been in a town where there's an old Walmart and now it's in a new location, there's something really different if they're still renting. Okay. Termination. To lose a franchise, it's difficult, it's costly. But if they have to do it, they will. If the franchisee, quite simply, is either given an eviction notice by the franchisor, or they want to step out, the franchisee, it is up to them to find a replacement. And they'll have to pay a transfer fee to cover the cost. Most franchisors have a right of first refusal, which means that a franchisee just can't simply appoint someone to be able to take their place. They've got to be able to meet the same specifications that the franchisee did. What this means is, if the franchisee, the new one, is not to their liking, they can take it over themselves. Because it's always very possible that it is an organization that perhaps is a competitor. Because remember, franchisees are independent organizations, and they're not going to want to share what they know. And so termination is difficult, it's expensive, they make it hard for them to leave, but sometimes, quite simply, it's unavoidable. And what are some of the reasons why? Well, refusal to turn in their reports. That's a good reason. A refusal to take advice. Lagging sales when other franchises around them are successful. These are all warning signs that something's going on. And so, what are some of the important things about contracts? Contracts need to apply a single contract, a single price to all franchises, to be able to treat franchisees equitably. That will be on the test somewhere, might be a choice. They don't vary over time. They're very consistent. They have to. And this is all for fairness. Enforcement very much has to do dealing with the reputation of the brand. No franchisor wants to put a franchisee out. It's like a bank. Banks don't want to own cars. They don't want to own houses. They have to take them sometimes when they have no choice, but they're not in the business of owning cars and houses. It's the same thing there. They're not in the business of owning unsuccessful franchises. They're in the business of making successful ones. And then the last is that the agreements tend to be self-enforcing and they incentivize. That cheating is not in their best interest. As a matter of fact, doing smart things like the reports, focusing on what the specials are in the franchise. And this is to make sure that there is consistent. The self-enforcing, by the way, basically means it's like a sundown date. All right. In other words, it's fixed in stone. And if you make an error, well, you cross that line. But with my children, I put my foot down so I can pick it back up. And this is the same thing with about a self-enforcing agreement. They're there for fixed notices, but the franchisee, of course, franchisor has every right to say, it's one offense, let's see what we can do about correcting this. And so that's the self-enforcing agreement, hopefully is there to incentivize, hopefully bring the franchisee to continued success. And there, unfortunately, it's so with all of this, there are still franchise stores that are owned by the franchisors. They are company outlets. Some areas are so vitally important to the success of an organization that the corporate locations feel like they must take it over. If you go through any international airport and you go through the duty-free locations, all of those locations are run directly by the corporations that the products are part of, all right? And so Swatch that's going to be directly from them. And so company store strategies have to do a lot with where the franchisor repeat business is not going to be there, but image is everything. It can also be for a reason that a franchise wants to get into a location, but they can't find anyone to want to come into that area. So I lived in a little town called Columbia, Mississippi, 7,200 people, 15,000 to 16,000 in the city because it was a county seat during the day. Everybody would go home outside at night, but they wanted to put a Wendy's franchise there. Well, there was no one to take over in that location, but Wendy's deemed it important enough to be able to try to put a store there, so they created a company store. Ran in the red for a couple of years. As business slowly built up, got in the black, a franchisee came in, ran it themselves, okay? So the company outlet was done to be able to grow it. And then when the business got good, they decided they were going to get out. And so there are reasons why you run company stores. Brand image is number one. You want to get into market locations where there is no franchisee at the moment. And another good reason is that a company store builds a great conduit to be able to have corporate individuals learn what the business is all about. Many times they maintain a company store and a franchise outlet in the same locations. It becomes a career path to move back and forth between the company side and the franchisee side. There can be people in corporate that go, I really got a hold of this. I like it. I want to start my own franchise. They've spent time learning under this system, and now they're out starting their own. And this is another advantage of the franchise in its structure, is it complements both sides. It makes the chain stronger. Both the franchisor and the franchisee benefit. It also means as well that people that come in the company store, burger flippers, get a little experience under their belt, they can move up to corporate as well. An important way to think of it is the redirection of ownership. So you use the franchisees to build the system. And then you say, now that we've got this idea sold, we're going to open our own. They expropriate. But there is no real exploitation of the franchisees. To me, I think it's just a great synergistic way to achieve a lot of success. I want you to think of that two-way conduit, back and forth, the forms and the synergies. And this is where, in its way, it is superior to the traditional horizontal structure, in that you've got basically everybody moving in the same direction. So we won't have to worry about this. And I'm going to talk about future trends in franchising. And I'll tell you ultimately how you achieve success. So, after all that wonderful talk, the unfortunate thing is that survival rates are still less than 50%. As a matter of fact, survival rates are around 15%. But seriously, that's not bad. Less than 10% of all restaurants succeed after 3 years. Restaurant business is the toughest business in the world, no doubt about it. Interestingly, 60% of all hardware stores succeed. Don't ask me why. One of the basic reasons, I think, of course, is the fact that the things that you sell in a hardware store are durable goods with a consistent life frame, so that they can actually have some shelf life and they don't lose their value. So, what is the success? Success happens when you get past that 4-year threshold. Franchise systems that are at least 4 years old offer a sharply lower probability. It's like that 4-year growth cycle. It's while you're in school, 4 years. The old saying is it takes 10,000 hours of dedication to become an expert at anything. I don't know if you know this, but you're adding up your 10,000 hours in a 4-year education, all right? It's also why a master's is only 2 years, because it takes twice as much effort. God knows why they want us to go 4 years for a PhD. I guess they just want to fry us. Anyway, survival trends. What is the biggest, or one of the majors, is if a franchisor can attract a favorable rating from a third party, influencers, Duncan Hines, then a certification of predicted success helps the franchisor gain reputation as a legitimate player, and this is what happened to Colonel Sanders. He's just an individual. He's a single person running a restaurant at a truck stop. And he was given that place by the truck stop owner just to run it. And it was basically right out of his house. Duncan Hines came in, said this is a good place, excellent chicken, and the rest is history. And Colonel Sanders says, where were you 10 years ago? No, I didn't say that. Some of its greatest advantages is when a solid relationship between them and the franchisors really gets bonded. That connection between them provides a great motivation. Now, there is a little bit of goal conflict because you realize that the franchisor wants to saturate a market area. And yes, they can be so close to each other that they cannibalize other franchises. But there is an out if the franchisor offers the new sites to an existing franchisee to come and take it up. Give them right of first refusal, and this is what happened with Bobby. Domino's wanted to grow in North Carolina. He started out in his little location. He got 2, 4, then 16. Literally, it exponentially grows. He has 53 Domino's franchise now and another 7 Slurpee franchises. So, I mean, that's how it happens. And here's the answer, the way to achieve success. It is not in having one franchise outlet, but having more than one. Multi-unit franchise. A single company owns multiple locations, and that's what Bobby does. Bob. And so one of Burger King's growth structures in the early 60s was they allowed multi-unit franchise. It broke some of the fundamental flaws of the single unit franchising, and it gave the franchisee some of the motivations of a franchisor. So think of it this way. You have 2 franchises now. What happens if one of my managers goes on vacation? I now have 2 stores. I can take the leading assistant, whoever is in one place, and put them at manager, or I can elevate someone in this location, put them up while they're there. They both gain knowledge. I can start to interact between these 2 franchisees, and these 2 franchisees have some geographical experience, so they know the locations together, and they have some firm connection. So this conduit between the franchisees is consistent. It also means that if I have supplies here at franchise 1, I can lend them to franchise 2, and it's fungible across the connection, and that's also a win as well. It also preserves the knowledge and the experience that the franchisee has gained while they've been on their trek in trying to secure a successful business. Multi-unit franchising, win-win situation. It's the best, okay? Except if you're Chick-fil-A, and Chick-fil-A only allows 1. And so if you get a question that says, what is the most successful strategy in franchising? it would be, what is the way to achieve the greatest success in franchising? It will be multi-unit franchise, and explain it's when a franchisee owns more than one unit. Bless you. And so we are done with franchising, finished. I'll have the other videos posted by tomorrow afternoon sometime. And we will finish up on Thursday talking about the future trends in channels. Hope y'all have a good day. Thank you.